London is an internationally renowned shopping centre. There are tens of thousands of shops spread out throughout the city. In fact, it's not a surprise at all because it's been an important trading centre since Roman times.
Building Londinium on a major river meant the Romans could import goods from all over the known world. Later, in medieval times, the city of London was built up on the site of Londinium, and it's here we can see evidence of the capital's earliest trading.
This is Leadenhall Market, one of London's oldest shopping centres. In fact, there's been a market here for 600 years for the sale of meat, fish, poultry and corn. This iron and glass building is Victorian. It was put up in 1881, but for medieval Londoners, the market was the principal source of goods. Traders often set up stalls in the houses around the market and in the nearby streets, and these were the very first shops. Many of them were open-fronted, like this wonderful fish shop here.
Because the city was the heart of London, all the major markets were found here. This meant that the earliest shops were based here too, and we can see this in the street names today. The Great Fire of London in 1666 destroyed some of the city markets, and that, plus a move west by respectable society, meant that new markets were needed outside the city. The most famous, and the largest in England, was Covent Garden. By the 1950s, this was a busy fruit, flower and vegetable market. But back in the 17th century, when the area was first developed, there wasn't a market planned at all.
In 1630, Covent Garden became the site of London's first experiment in town planning, because the 4th Earl of Bedford commissioned Inigo Jones to design a square suitable for gentlemen to live in. Now, Inigo Jones had been to Italy, and it's almost certain that this square was based on an Italian piazza. It was unique in 17th century London and was very much copied. Unfortunately, none of those original 17th century houses survives to this day, but nevertheless, the place where they were built defines the shape of Covent Garden.
Canny market traders saw the opportunity and moved in, setting up stalls in the square.
Over there was Bedford House, the Earl's residence, with the back garden behind it. And it was there around 1650 that the first unofficial traders set up. Within 20 years, there were so many of them that the Earl applied for a licence to try and regulate the situation, but still the market kept on growing.
Because of the rapidly growing market, the gentry moved out and writers, artists and actors moved in. Covent Garden became an entertainment area with theatres and coffee houses. With all the market stalls as well, the place was chaotic. So in 1830, the Duke of Bedford commissioned the market buildings. They were glassed over 40 years later to create more space for trading. The market dominated Covent Garden right up to the 1970s, when it was finally moved away to Vauxhall, and the market buildings were successfully redeveloped into a tourist shopping destination. Over the years, with so many people coming to the market, it's no surprise that many retailers set up shop in the streets around it. In 1869, one of our largest grocery chains actually started at 173 Drury Lane.
Enterprising shopkeepers have always set up in places where people could reach them easily, near markets, on busy thoroughfares, or just near important buildings. And that's why St James's was such a prime location.
The shops of St James's have traditionally been associated with luxury, wealth and exclusivity. And this all started because retailers came to be near the court, which had moved to St James's Palace in 1698. And remarkably, one of those shops is still trading today, the wine merchants, Berry Brothers and Rudd. The shop was first opened as a grocery store by the widow Bourne in the 1690s.
In the 1730s, the shop was rebuilt by widow-born son-in-law William Pickering, and it's more or less now as it was then. If he came in here now, he'd recognise the place, with a wonderful uneven wooden floor. Look at this. And outside, it's almost the same as it was then in the 18th century. Really remarkable. It was still a grocer's shop, and so this huge set of scales here is called the coffee mill, and they weighed not only the coffee, but also people, like this. Oh, thank goodness I'm not quite that heavy.
From 1765, it became a fashionable pastime for the great and the good to come and get themselves weighed.
And what's rather entertaining is that they wrote all the weights down in great ledgers. So here we have His Royal Highness the Duke of Cambridge, 1516 stone. He was quite well fed. Here we have Lord Byron, measured with boots but no hat on. I wonder what clothes he was wearing. The Berry family got into the business in the late 1700s, and Mr. Hugh Rudd joined in 1918. But it's really the Berrys who run it, and they've been running it for generations. And Simon Berry, you're the...
Well, I'm the seventh generation.
Seventh generation.
Yes.
Now, going back to the early days, how did they keep the wine then?
Well, wine was kept entirely in barrel in those days, and bottles were really only used as decanters to take it from the barrel to the glass.
So do you mean that people had their own bottles?
They had their own bottles, mainly because the thing you have to remember is that no matter how expensive the wine was in those days, the bottle was always more valuable. Glass was such an expensive commodity that no bottles until about the mid-19th century had their own labels on them saying what the wine was. What they had was medallions which had the name of the person, the customer, who owned the bottle.
No.
Absolutely. And it didn't matter, even if you had a very embarrassing name. We've got here a bottle which dates from 1753. And the owner of the bottle proudly put his name on it, despite the fact his name is Mr. Bastard.
Oh, that's absolutely wonderful. So are there a lot of these about?
The Bastard family were great drinkers.
Right.
And obviously extremely rich, and so they had a huge amount of bottles named with their name on them. And in fact, any bottle this shape is now referred to in the trade as a Bastard bottle.
This is the barrel lift. This is how they used to get all the wine from their cellars up to street level. And this, of course, is St James's Street. This is the fashionable heart of Regency London. And it was actually the Regency beau monde, the beautiful people at the apex of society, who brought about the next change in shopping history.
By 1800, London was the largest city in Europe. It was well on its way to having 2 million inhabitants. Demand for all manner of merchandise, from household goods to the most luxurious wares, flourished, and so the number of shops increased to meet the demand. The consumer revolution had begun. Just like today, one of Regency London's favourite pastimes was shopping.
And one of the greatest shopaholics of the whole of the Regency period was this chap, Beau Brummell. He was incredibly vain, a great dandy. It's said that he took 5 hours to get dressed every morning because he wanted everything to be perfect. He loved elaborate neckwear, and he may even have invented the idea of wearing a tie with a suit. The thing was about those Regency dandies, they loved not only shopping, but they loved promenading, going out to see and be seen. And as a result of that, they changed the face of shopping architecture.
The love of the promenade led to the arcade. This, the Burlington Arcade, was built in 1818 and at 585 feet is the longest in Britain.
The arcade was actually a French idea, but it quickly came over to England probably because of our rotten weather. It was actually brought here by Lord George Cavendish, who'd been to Paris, and there he saw the Passage des Panoramas, and he realised it was a great financial success and thought it might work here. There's another story that he was fed up with people coming out of the gin and oyster bars and chucking all the remains over his garden wall, and the smell was absolutely disgusting. And yet another theory is that his wife demanded somewhere where she could go shopping with her friends in peace and quiet and not have to mix, with the riffraff.
Good
Hello.
afternoon. So, have we done carrying of parcels in the arcade?
Sorry, who are you?
I'm the beadle of the Burlington Arcade.
The beadle.
I am.
So you're the boss.
I am, sir. I am.
So, sorry, why aren't I allowed to carry a parcel?
It's just deemed ungentlemanlike, sir. So originally,
Are you suggesting I'm not a gentleman?
I wouldn't dream of such a thing. So I wouldn't dream of such.
Right. So, what other funny rules are there?
Originally in the arcade, you weren't allowed to whistle because the pickpockets used to whistle to each other. In fact, there's only one individual we allowed to whistle, which is Sir Paul McCartney.
Well, that's fantastic. Now, is it okay this time if I take my parcel out?
It is indeed, sir. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think I better scarper.
Okay.
Thanks very much indeed.
You're welcome, sir.
Cheers.
Good night.
Burlington Arcade really is a beautiful place to come and browse. And windows are obviously a crucial part of shop architecture because they lure passers-by inside. It was in the mid-18th century that glass first started to be used in shop windows. But without modern manufacturing techniques, how on earth did they make window panes? London's busy retail streets are packed with window shoppers. But up until the 18th century, most shops would have been open-fronted like stalls because window glass was so expensive. This shop here is one of the oldest surviving bow-fronted shops in London, built in 1754. It was originally a tobacconist, Freiburg and Treyer, and you'll notice that all the panes of glass are very small. Come over and have a look. Look at this pane of glass here. It's very wobbly and uneven. If I move about, I'm sort of distorted all over the place, and that's because it was handmade. How did they make the glass for those windows? Well, actually, what they were making was bits like this. And Lane here is going to try and show me how to make one. Wish me luck. The process for making crown glass was perfected by the French in the 14th century, but they kept it a secret for 300 years. Now that's what, over 1,000 degrees, I guess, is it?
That's right, 11
Right. Because the glass is blown into a hollow globe called a crown, the glass becomes thinner and clearer, and of much better quality than earlier methods produced. Lane let me have a go at blowing.
When you blow, just blow gently and steady. Bring this up to your mouth and keep it turning all times.
It's much harder than it looks. The next stage is to attach another hot iron.
Yeah, great.
Right.
Right.
Ah! I've broken it. Is that all right?
That's what you're meant to do.
Oh, good. What are you doing now?
Opening the hole up in the shape.
Okay, that was where we blew the air in originally.
That's right, yeah. So you're making it a little bit larger.
So it's now roughly all the same thickness apart from the very centre.
That's right.
To create the flat disc, the secret is to spin the glass.
Okay, and spin like mad. It's going slowly. Yeah! Okay, stop spinning.
You stop spinning now, that won't move anymore.
Really?
Stop moving.
To make those 18th century windows, they must have spun the glass to 3 times this size and then cut it into a grid to create the window panes.
Thanks.
New technology in glass production around the 1840s meant that shops could have much larger windows, which were used to display the increasingly wide range of goods that were being imported from Britain's vast Victorian empire. Then came mass production. Small shops, like grocers and drapers, began to expand the range of goods on offer. And some grew into the familiar department stores we know today. Perhaps the most famous of these, and probably the most famous shop in the world, is Harrods. Harrods is the largest store in London. It covers an astounding 4.5 acres. But it hasn't always been quite so magnificent. This department here, it's full of handbags and stuff, and it's known as the Room of Luxury. And what's really interesting about it is this ceiling. Look at this wonderful moulded plaster ceiling with all sorts of goddesses and cherubs and things. Now that ceiling is about the same size as the original Harrods shop, and indeed it's in about the same place. So this was the original Harrods shop. It's absolutely tiny. Harrods' fortunes were changed dramatically in 1889 with the appointment of a new general manager, Richard Burbidge. He had a vision of a grand store covering a whole block. Building work started in 1901 and took 4 years to complete.
Telegraphic address, Harrods, everything, London. The most interesting and beautiful store in the whole of Britain and one of the most famous in the world.
And over the years, almost everything has been for sale at Harrods. A.A. Milne purchased the teddy bear that became Winnie the Pooh, and Alfred Hitchcock had fresh herrings flown to him in Hollywood.
And I'm told that Ronald Reagan even ordered a baby elephant from here. He called it Gertie. It's just as well they've got space. We're now 7 floors below the street behind Harrods. This is where they bring all the stuff in. They take it through on these forklift trucks and then take it up in lifts up to the store above. What a fantastic place. I want to drive one.
Burbidge lured customers in with a more familiar mode of transport, England's first escalator in 1898.
The current owner, Mohammed Al Fayed, also wanted to treat his customers to a spectacle. So in 1997, he spent an astonishing £20 million to build this fantastic Egyptian escalator.
No prizes for guessing where the Egyptian theme comes from. I met Bill Mitchell, who designed the escalator.
These pillars, are these solid stone?
No, it's sand and cement.
Sand and cement?
Sand and cement, 1 part cement.
Right.
4 parts sand. So.
Just like you have on semis in Bermondsey?
Absolutely.
Right.
Columns are hollow and they actually carry the air conditioning.
No. Now look, I want to know about these panels here, because there are a lot of these.
Yes.
These are sand and cement too, are they?
Yes.
Well, tell me, how did they get made? You must have skilled stonemasons doing this.
No, I did these. I carved these myself.
You carved these yourself?
Yeah,
There are hundreds of them.
There are. There's about 270.
Go on, tell me how you did it.
Well, you put your sand and cement
Okay.
on the wall whilst it's wet.
Yes.
You do a drawing
Right.
in charcoal.
Right.
You pick it up and you put it against the panel.
Right.
And you rub it.
Right.
Then you peel it off slowly.
Right.
And it leaves
A
this
transfer,
line
in fact.
as a transfer.
Okay.
Then you put your hand in your pocket.
Right.
And you bring out your knife.
Oh! A dangerous weapon.
A dangerous weapon. And you start to carve it.
So this is just a letter opener.
That's all.
And you carved all these panels with that?
All of that. Yeah.
That's amazing.
This escalator is totally over the top, but you've got to admire the showmanship behind it. Harrods had an arch rival in Selfridges, the other famous London department store, equally renowned for showmanship and display.
Selfridges' window displays weren't just about merchandising, they were about theatre and spectacle. The chap behind Selfridges, Mr. Gordon Selfridge from Chicago, was really a sort of showman, a Barnum and Bailey character. Now, most big London stores started as just a small shop, but this place was designed from the outset to be a vast department store. Gordon Selfridge wanted to create a retail palace.
Building work began on the store in 1907, and it continued growing right up until the 1970s. I met Eric Parry, an architect who's working on the restoration of the exterior of Selfridges.
Tell me about how this extraordinary place was built.
It actually, in its building, changed the regulations because it's the first building, not the first steel frame building. The Ritz was the first steel frame building in London in 1907. But this was the first steel frame building which then supported the stone that you see.
Did Gordon Selfridge always get his own way?
He had a vision for a huge central dome. And I think the top of that was going to be as tall, if not taller, than St. Paul's. So
No.
there was an extraordinary space, but it wasn't to be. His ambitions were curtailed.
Right. Tell me about the main entrance as it is now, the sort of fabulous sculpture over the door.
This 14-ton sculpture of the Queen of Time rides below the idea of commerce and the ship and the prow and a myriad of complex iconography that draws you in. So it is and still is this most extraordinarily crafted threshold to a different world, to a world of fantasy and display and theatre.
Under Selfridges, in the basements, is a warren of corridors.
And the building's gone through so many changes, I don't think anyone knows what these various rooms were originally meant for. In fact, I'm not quite sure I'm going to find my way out again. The underground, that's the central line, runs very, very close to this building, and if you listen, you can quite often hear trains going past. There was a rumour, and I think it probably is only a rumour, that Gordon Selfridge had his own private underground station here. It's a wonderful thought, isn't it? And then there are these mysterious rooms here. You see that it's a sort of War Department number on the door. That's number 14 and number 13. And in fact, there was a secret American intelligence headquarters down here during the war. They had a super scrambling device. It was codenamed X-ray. And if Winston Churchill wanted to speak directly to the American president, he would get on the phone in the cabinet war rooms. There was a direct line underground to this place, the basement of Selfridges, and here they would scramble it to send the message across the Atlantic. Amazing.
Up above was a spectacular roof garden with tea rooms and fashion shows. There was even a shooting range.
This is what the roof looks like today, and sadly all the gardens have gone. Great empty flower pots. What the shoppers below didn't realise in those grand old days was that all the rock and the earth and the plants and the water up here weighed more than 2,000 tonnes. It's a terrifying thought that the roof might have given way at any moment. Wouldn't it be wonderful if during this restoration they could restore the roof as well and have beautiful gardens up here again? I think it's most unlikely that anyone will build a new department store as grandly as Selfridges. Retailers simply don't have that much money. But this fantastic frontage has lasted almost 100 years, and with luck, after the restoration, it'll be equally beautiful in another 100 years.